this video, we're going to talk about troubleshooting velocity issues with your Tippmann X7. The first thing I want to go over is the number one cause of low velocity is usually due to having a low pressure output nitrogen tank. That's one of the most common that we run into. If you have a low output pressure on your nitrogen or compressed air tank, anything below 500 or 600, you'll obviously have low velocity. Tippmann recommends that you have a nitrogen or compressed air tank with an output pressure over 800 to 850 psi. That's going to ensure that you get really good velocity. We're going to then move to the next most common thing that we run into. Is a lot of people have the velocity screw adjusted all the way in, and that's another cause of low velocity. If your screw's turned all the way in, your gun's going to shoot really, really low. We usually recommend that you start off by chronographing your gun with the velocity screw flush with the power tube. The next common problem that we run into is a crack in the power tube, or maybe even a weak drive spring. That'll usually cause low velocity. I'll show you how to get to that power tube here in a second. We'll start off by pulling our push pins out. And you want to make sure that your gun's not in the cocked position. It'll put a lot of pressure on your end cap and it could possibly push the end cap out. This gun's not in the cocked position, so we'll go ahead, we'll pull that end cap off. You have your drive spring and your guide pin. We'll leave those two together, set those off to the side. Like I was saying before, your drive spring, if it is compressed down or it's been in the gun for a long period of time, that will cause some low velocity issues. So you want to make sure that, I usually recommend that you replace your drive spring probably once a year. That's usually a good maintenance regimen, just to replace that drive spring once a year. So we'll set that off to the side for now. We'll go ahead and pull our lower grip off. Go ahead and remove our magazine, our mag well, pull our tombstone out, and we'll set that off to the side. From there, what we'll do is we'll flip the gun over. You want to make sure that your velocity screw's turned all the way in. That'll ensure you can pull all your internals out of the back end of the gun. As you can see, we have ours turned all the way in. We'll flip it over and we'll try to pull our internals out of the back end. Sometimes if you go to pull your internals out of the back end, you'll run into a situation where they might not slide out very easily. One easy way to get rid of that is to just loosen up the body half just a little bit. Just loosen up these 1/8 Allen bolts using your 1/8 Allen key. Just loosen them up just a little bit, and that'll help everything slide out of the back end a little bit easier. So we'll go ahead, we'll set this off to the side, put it over here, and you can see we have our front bolt, linkage arm, power tube, and our rear bolt with the rear bolt O-ring. One of the most common things that we see is a crack in the power tube. The crack will usually happen along the bottom. If you do have a crack in your power tube, that will cause low velocity. We also see aftermarket front bolts, which can cause low velocity. Some of the aftermarket front bolts will have an internal O-ring on the inside of the front bolt. That will cause a lot of low velocity issues. The rear bolt O-ring, if your rear bolt O-ring is swollen, that will also cause a lot of low velocity issues. It won't allow that rear bolt to enter the power tube, so that can definitely cause some low velocity issues. So we'll just go ahead, we'll go back through and we'll reassemble everything. Start off by putting our power tube and our rear bolt assembly in. Just kind of slide that back into place. Put our tombstone back into place. Another thing I want to touch base on is if you're shooting CO2 and you have really, really high velocity, you always want to check with CO2 periodically throughout the day. As the day warms up and you run into really high velocity issues, it could be because the CO2 is actually expanding inside your tank. So you periodically want to chronograph your gun throughout the day just to make sure that you're not getting really, really high velocity. Another thing you always want to check for if you do have low velocity, one of the most common issues that we run into is just a low tank. You always want to make sure that your tank's full. So just always check to make sure your tank's full before ruling out the possibility that you have low velocity. And that pretty much concludes the video, the Tippmann X7 troubleshooting with low velocity.